Welcome back to today's Family Connection Point. Today we're in Matthew chapter 27, verses 15 through 32, and we're talking about tuning into God's voice, and we're going to use these headphones as our illustration. The idea that we want to get across to our children today is that God's voice should be louder than all the others. There's a lot of people who want to speak into our children's lives. There's their friends, there's peers at school, there's TV, there's music, and a lot of those voices that are speaking to our children are actually in direct contradiction to what they've already heard from God's Word. And we want them to know that God's Word should be louder than every other voice that they hear. And his voice should drown out all the other voices. So what we're going to use these headphones. These are actually noise canceling headphones. And when I wear these, what it allows me to do is it allows me to put all the other distractions, all the other noises, it puts it all in the background, and it brings the voice that's coming through the headphones, it brings it to the forefront. In fact, I can mow my lawn and hear a podcast and hear the podcaster's voice very, very clearly. And this is the illustration we want our children to see. We want God's voice to come to the forefront. When they're hearing all the other noise of this world, when they're feeling pressure to conform, we want them to say, no, I know what's right, and I'm going to walk in obedience. I'm going to listen to God's voice and drown out all the others. Well, we're going to look at two groups of people that actually did the opposite. They allowed the voices and the opinions of others to influence their actions, even when they knew what they were asking them to do was wrong. The first one is Pilate. Pilate actually brings Jesus before the people, and it says that Pilate knows that Jesus is innocent. In fact, he says the only reason that the religious leaders have brought Jesus before them, Pilate knows, is because they're jealous, because they see him as a threat to their power. And so Pilate comes up with a plan, and his plan is a diplomatic plan. It's, I'm going to take Jesus and Barabbas, a known criminal, and I'm going to put them before the people. And this was a custom of the time during religious festivals to free a criminal. And he was going to allow them to choose who was going to be free, either Barabbas, this known criminal, or Jesus, who hadn't done anything. And Pilate thought that this would kind of take care of itself. But before he did that, Pilate's wife came to him and said, hey, I had a dream, and I've been tormented by this dream. You don't want to mess with Jesus. So Pilate goes through with his plan, and he puts Jesus before the people, and they say, free Barabbas, and they say, crucify Jesus. And Pilate is kind of taken off guard, but instead of doing what's right and saying, listen, he's innocent, there's no way I'm going to free a criminal and let this guy be murdered, he gives in to the pressure of the people. You see, he was a politician. He wanted to please everybody, and so instead of doing what he knew was right, he chose to listen to the crowd. But the crowd themselves were being influenced. You see, this is the same crowd who, many of them probably were the people who praised Jesus when he entered into Jerusalem, and maybe had heard Jesus speak, maybe had actually followed Jesus at a distance. But now they had been influenced by the religious leaders, and now they were crying out for the murder of Jesus. So finally, Pilate washes his hands publicly and says, hey, his blood is on your hands, and he allows Jesus to be mocked and beaten. They actually weave a crown of thorns, and they crush it on his head, and they spit and beat Jesus, and they mock him. And that's kind of where we leave the story. There's another part where actually Jesus has to have, because he's been beaten so bad, he actually has to have his cross carried for him. And that's kind of where we leave the story. But what we want to focus in for our children is this. We see these two groups of people. We see Pilate and we see the crowd, and they both have been influenced, and they're worried about what other people think. You know, if I make this decision, if I do what I know is right, these people knew Jesus hadn't done anything. Pilate knew he was innocent, but they were worried about what other people might think. They were listening to all the other voices. And what we want our children to understand is that the only voice that matters is Jesus' voice. The only one that we're seeking to please is Jesus. And we want them to turn up the volume of Jesus' voice when they're tempted to listen to the world, to listen to their friends, when they're tempted to do what they know is wrong. We want his voice to be the loudest voice. Galatians 1:10 says that we are not seeking to please men, we're seeking to please God. If we sought to please men, we would be a servant of men, but we are servants of Christ. See, he is our audience. He's the one that we seek to please. And so we're not listening to the world, because I don't have to answer to the world. I serve Jesus. And one day I will stand before Jesus, and his voice is going to be the only one that matters. So what we want to do is we want our children to walk through this life and to know that Jesus' voice should drown out all the other voices that are in contradiction to that. That's our lesson today. I hope that was helpful. I'll see you tomorrow.